Hi, Steve.
Hey,
Thanks for
Jade.
talking to me today. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm all right. Yes.
Great. So I wanted to speak to you today, Steve Lobley of Spring Leadership. I've been talking to a lot of clients about their marketing, as I always do, and what often comes up is business strategy, vision, mission, where they need to go to as a company. I thought it'd be great to chat to you today so that our viewers can get a bit of insight into why that's so important when it comes to a marketing strategy. It's the first place we start with the marketing strategy is where are we going to? What's the vision? What's the mission? Where do you need to get to? What are the strategic pillars? What are we focusing on? So the best marketing strategies will be linked to those different pillars. So yeah, if you could tell me a bit about why getting those bits done first is really key, that'd be great.
So, yes, did you find that's what happens? You have a conversation with a client and immediately lob that hand grenade in there, which is okay. So what's your vision? Because
In a
yeah,
roundabout way.
well, because I think it's really interesting because when I sit down with clients and when we meet teams for the first time, that after learning about their business. What are they doing, what products they've got, marketing, the various different aspects of the business that one might be interested in. That's the kind of that's the first question I ask is, well, so what business are you in? Are you in the transport business or the railway business? Where do you want to be in 5 years, 10 years time? How does that look? That kind of thing like this. And so I find the same, in some ways, blank look sometimes. People have an idea, they're generally going in that direction, but they haven't really thought about it. So I think that's my main experience, is that people need to get a reset, an answer from a strategic point of view. Where are they? Where are they going? How are they going to get there?
So
Okay.
what's a good vision statement? Like, because a lot of people will have a vision statement and you can look at it and say, okay, that's not a vision statement or that's not a mission, because it's quite scientific what they actually each are. And there's lots of definitions that you can find on the internet. But myself,
Well,
we can quickly look at a mission and say, that's not quite a mission, that's more of a
yeah.
vision, or vice versa.
This is one where the debate could go on for hours, and but I tend to boil it down to one that seems to work for all the clients that I've worked with, is and if you have to stay away from American definition and English, and make the difference between mission and vision in this way. A mission is a constant purpose. It's what you do all the time. And one of the examples that I use is that NASA's mission is space exploration for the benefit of science.
It's
Okay.
never going to change, is it? It's never
It
going to
doesn't.
change.
No, it doesn't. No, it's continuous. So space exploration, Mars, comets, going to the sun, the moon, you name it. It's space exploration, um, and that's the one I understand it to be. Now, a vision is something different. It's almost like a sub level of that, and the clues in the word. It's what something will look like in the
Yeah.
future. Um, so, actually, a vision is quite easy to define. It's what something will look like by when. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was listening, I don't know whether anybody's listened to the podcast 30 Minutes to the Moon, but John F. Kennedy said, we will take a man to the moon and return him home safely within a decade.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, and if you listen to the podcast talking to people who are involved in it, they said he simplified it down to that particular statement. And then everything we did was in pursuit of, is this going to help us get a man to the moon and return home safely? Yeah. And so that difference between a mission, which is space exploration, almost like an umbrella, constant purpose, and a vision of where you want to get to by a particular time is enormously mobilizing and motivating for an organization and people once it's clear. And that is usually not what is clear. So
And so how do you, when you work, how do you find companies face the challenge? And so say they've got a vision and they're quite clear about that, what then comes next? What's the challenge after that? Okay, we've got our vision, we know where we need to get to and by
mm,
when.
mm.
What now? Like
Well,
what's the next thing?
Well, usually what happens is I think the best way of explaining it is with a diagram, and I'm a great fan of pictures. So let me share a picture with you. I believe that the best way of looking at a business is to think about it like the legs of a stool. You've got strategy, leadership, and culture. And if you don't get all of those three things balanced, you've got a wobbly stool.
I like the wobbly stool analogy. I've always liked that one.
And obviously if it gets very wobbly, you fall over. So, it's quite a good metaphor for the whole thing. So the question when we're working with businesses, and obviously this applies when you think about marketing strategy too, is where is the wobble? So if a company has got a clear mission and vision, and knows how it's positioned in the marketplace, and knows where it wants to go to, and has got distinctive activities, etc., then you can argue that the strategy point is covered. But then usually the discussion that takes place is, yeah, but it's not happening.
Yeah. Why is it not happening? Everything's so clear. The document I've saved in the document drive is so clear. Why is it not happening?
Exactly. And so, the mind naturally shifts then down here to leadership. So does everybody know what the strategy is? Is everybody working towards the strategy, etc., etc.? And so sometimes what happens is you have a situation where the strategy is clear, but it's not being implemented well. And so leadership and leadership development and leadership understanding and leadership also in terms of teams and whether they're working in the right way. So you might not have a senior management team, for example. You might have a single director or two directors at the top of a business who are very clear about where the business needs to go to, but nobody else does. So they're not demonstrating good leadership behaviors and leading the business. So leadership needs to work. And then you often have a problem where the strategy is clear, the leadership's quite tight and is working very well, but something isn't right. And it's quite often culture. And so we often look at what the culture of the organization is, because Peter Drucker is supposed to have said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. You can have the strategy, you can have the leadership, but if you've got the wrong culture, you won't be able to implement it. So you get this interesting thing of a circular linkage between all three in order to get the stool balanced. And so what happens is we might work with people on each corner, and when we've worked with you, you've seen the strategy bit get sorted, and then that can be applied into marketing strategy and delivered. And then the leadership of the marketing team, for example, knows where they are supposed to be going, what they're supposed to be doing. And the whole of the culture of the organization is motivated around a vision and a mission to try and achieve that. So you can work on the corners, but also you can work in the gaps, because sometimes it's the connection between strategy and leadership, because leadership's got to come up with a strategy. Leadership by their behaviors creates the culture, and the culture itself might determine the sorts of people that fit into the organization, and that might not be appropriate for delivering the strategy. So quite often you see businesses that are going through growth stages find that the people that they had in particular roles are no longer suited. You see this in the outside world, entrepreneurial and charismatic leaders of businesses that have become really successful actually suddenly find, as the business gets to a particular growth stage, they're not the right people to be leading the business. So the whole thing knits together quite neatly into those things, and a business as it's growing can start wobbling at a different place. And sometimes over time, everything's fine, secure, great. See you later. We leave you to it. But then a year later, they're starting to have some issues.
Well, what I like about that is that often leadership, like leadership coach and leadership training, can be seen as a bit of a fluffy word because it can be looked at in isolation. That's why I really like your approach at Spring. I really like that it's looked at as one piece. It's not leadership coaching, it's not strategy development, it's not culture building. Often culture building is about, okay, let's get some words on a wall and we're all tenacious and we're all caring and we're all kind and we're all this. But actually, I'm more interested in the gaps between where does strategy meet culture and how do they work together. And I think there's a lot of companies who will feel that void, is that yes, we've got a leadership training program and we employ a company and they train our leaders to be great managers. They get all the tick box exercises, the qualifications of how to manage people, but it's not directly linked with, we're doing this because it's in order for us to translate the strategy to the team and looking at what behaviors our team members embody in order to achieve that strategy. What sort of challenges do you think, have you got any examples, not live ones, but just where, because I'm quite interested in culture, the word gets thrown around so much, but I don't think anyone fully understands it at times. What's an example of where culture would get wobbly in that part of the stool? Where might we see culture fall down in achieving the strategy?
Well, let me make a couple of points. One thing that's interesting, you just talked about leadership and leadership training. I can't remember the name of the guy as we're talking now, but the analogy that was used, that you've got to be very careful about with any sort of training, but leadership training, I think, and development in any shape, is you can't take the fish out of the tank, clean them up, and then put them back in a dirty tank and expect things to change.
Yeah.
That's such a powerful
That's exactly
analogy.
what it is, isn't it? Yeah.
Because what you need to do is clean the tank. And in some ways, what you're doing is saying, we need to make sure our culture is fit for purpose. Yeah. And our leadership is fit for purpose. And our strategy, mission, vision, etc., is all fit for purpose. They're all working in synergy. And I think the culture question is an interesting one, because we're actually going through an enormous potential challenge now, because the old challenge with culture was how much of the culture is created by the leadership and the behaviors they have. There's a great work by, I think he's behind me, Edgar Schein, about how 5 leadership behaviors create the culture that you have. So role modeling, what they pay attention to, what criteria they use for promotion, etc., and how they react to critical incidents, for example. All of those have an impact on the culture. And a very simple example would be if the leaders and senior people of a business turn up late for meetings, then surprise, surprise, everybody in the organization thinks it's okay to turn up late for meetings.
Or they turn up on time but resent the leadership and then hence don't really care about the company and they sign out. So it's a bit like, we're a team, let's do the same thing.
Exactly, and walking the talk, and etc., etc., etc. So what you get is you get these very, very subtle things that have developed over many years. There's lots of different definitions for culture, and I won't go into those. But quite a lot of the time, it's to do with the way we do things around here.
Yeah, this is how we do things. Just keeping it simple.
And so what's happening right now is we're almost. I was talking to a guy about this 3 weeks ago. We're almost creating now, almost throwing the culture of organizations up in the air and then creating subcultures. So for example, in the COVID situation, you have had a situation where a load of people have been working remotely, but some people have been staying in the offices to work under quite difficult circumstances under the COVID situation. And what's instantly happened is you've got an external culture of remote people and an internal culture of people who are fighting the good fight in the trenches to keep things going. And the two are not necessarily working well together. We've also got the legacy of how much remote working is going to take place. And what does that look like in terms of managing and creating a culture that is going to deliver on the strategy? And how do leaders lead when the culture is what it is, or it's in formation? So we've got a very, very interesting and challenging thing going on right now, which is a lot of people, McKinsey and a lot of people are doing a lot of work on working out how do we need to manage our way through that situation. And I can see that what's going to happen is potentially in the legs of the stool, the strategy is going to get sorted because people are going to know where they're going. And the people who are able to cope with a a lot more uncertainty, move quickly, and probably more resilient than others are going to be the people who are going to be leading businesses and being successful in it. But the question mark that's going to be left is how do we craft and adjust and make our culture fit for
Yeah.
purpose? And sometimes what happens is you get, as you said, you get stuff written on walls which is not being lived. Yeah.
Yeah.
And as soon as you do that, you get inconsistency and people don't buy into it, and they
I
create their
think
own
as well,
culture.
sorry, I think as well that it's overcomplicated. I'm going to summarize in a second and we can have a last question. I think sometimes culture, leadership, and strategy is overcomplicated so much by training courses that are
Oh
in
yeah.
depth. How can we build the culture? Let's get things on the wall. Let's make pamphlets. Well, sometimes speak to people. This is how we do things. When
Yes.
you did it like that, that's not how we do things. Could you do it a bit more like this, please? What can I give to you to help you see how we do things? Here's the strategy. Here's where we're going to. And that's what I like about the wobbly stool analogy is it is keeping it simple. Let's come up with the strategy. Let's make sure that the right people are sat in the right seats of the right bus, as you often talk about. Who's sitting where? How does their job align with that strategy? What behaviours do they need in order to get the team mobilised and on board? And just keep that cycle going of review.
Absolutely.
Often, I think it's a triangle that's like a pyramid rather than interconnected. You know, we've got
Maybe.
the strategies at the top. Let's pass it down to the leaders. Then let's pass it down to the teams, and then make sure they adopt the right culture, even though I'm not going to. So it's very that I think there's something really interesting about keeping it flowing around and keeping it a little bit more simple in terms of how do we get this stool to balance.
Yeah.
You know, not 20-30 page documents, keeping
Yes.
things simple and briefing
Yeah.
people and day to day. I know that you guys as well, especially Corinne, when it comes to helping leaders, it's very much real life activities.
Yes.
You know,
Yes. Definitely.
let's not just talk about the theory and the concept that you'd learn in a classroom at a training course, but let's look at live examples of where the culture's not working, and let's talk to individuals about how they can adapt and real life test out these scenarios
Yeah.
to get the strategy achieved. And I think that's why I wanted to have this chat today. Was I'm often asked, what do I need to do to evolve my strategy in order to get better results from the marketing? And I often talk about the wobbly stool, which is we need to get that bit working, and then
Yeah.
marketing feeds off of that.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
yeah.
I couldn't have put it better myself.
Ah,
That's exactly what.
little script
Good.
you wrote me was good. I'm joking. So yeah, thanks for taking the time today,
No
and
problem at all.
yeah, I look forward to speaking soon. Thank
All
you.
right. Take care. Cheers then. Bye.